Trump's strategy in Iran is now very clear and it's very dangerous and impacts you and I. Trump believes that having this US blockade around Iran is going to put enough pressure on Iran to come to the negotiating table with a better deal and more concessions. And he was told that by the 29th of April, which is today, this will happen, that Iran is going to come because of the pain that it's suffering from. And I'm going to go into what that is. The idea is that the US blockade is going to destroy Iran's oil industry and cut the government revenue. And he's also afraid of restarting the war, given that he now really understands Iran's capability of retaliating. I don't think he really understood that when he started the war on the 28th of Feb, because the information he was getting from the Israelis that this was going to be very easy. It's an easy job in and out, such as same thing with Venezuela. Look how good Venezuela was. We can repeat that, and that will be your legacy. Clearly now he understands Iran's more powerful than first was explained to him. And so this pressure tactic is based on this. By attempting to stop the ships that are coming out of the Iranian ports that are carrying the oil, Iran obviously won't be able to export the oil, and which would lead to not only a cut in the government revenue, but also in permanent damage to the oil wells, because the oil wells are going to have to shut because they are unable to export the excess oil that they have. So Iran exports about 1.5 million barrels per day of oil, and at $90 or $95 a barrel, this is much lower than the actual figure of today, which is $115. The reason is because Iran has to give discounts because its oil is sanctioned. On those figures, it's earning about $140 million per day from its oil exports. It also earns about $50 million a day from petrochemicals it exports, and also about $90 million a day from non-oil sector. So we're talking about $280 million a day from just these three items. And the idea is to choke that $280 million a day, but also damage its oil industry. That is, in Trump's mind, enough pressure to make Iran concede. The thinking is by shutting the exports, Iran will have to shut in production because Iran won't have enough storage to store all this oil that's being produced. So it will actually have to shut the oil wells that it has. And when mature, low pressure oil is shut down, what happens is water seeps in what is called water coning. And these water droplets, because they use water to get the oil out in low pressure wells, if that stops, the oil droplets will seep into the rock pores permanently. And so if you try to get the oil afterwards, it's going to be a mix of oil and water. And so the oil cannot really be recovered. And these forced shut-ins can permanently damage or destroy about 300 to 500,000 barrels per day permanently. And the report that this is based on said that Iran has essentially 13 days from the 12th of April to fill its storage. And after that, after the 13 days, it's not going to have enough storage, and therefore it's going to reduce its oil production. 13 days from the 12th of April is around the 26th of April, which is when we're supposed to see these oil shut-ins happen, which we haven't seen. And Trump was told by the 29th of April, say some extra storage is put online. By the 29th of April, we'll definitely see Iran suffer enough such that they're going to come to the table. Otherwise, there's going to be irrecoverable damage to the oil wells. And this is what he said about
when you have lines of vast amounts of oil pouring through your system. If for any reason that line is closed because you can't continue to put it into containers or ships, which has happened to them, they have no ships because of the blockade. What happens is that line explodes from within, both mechanically and in the earth. Something happens where it just explodes. So they say they only have about 3 days left before that happens. And when it explodes, you can never rebuild it the way it was. In other words, it will always be, if you rebuild it, it's hard to rebuild it all, but it would only be about 50% of what it is right now. So it's a very powerful thing that takes place, sort of having to do with nature. But when that gets clogged at the end, in other words, when you have to turn it off because you have no place to store this oil, either put it on ships or storage tanks, which they are just about finished with, a very bad thing's going to happen. So I think they're under pressure.
And this is what Bessent said. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, this is on 27th of April, so 2 days ago, while the surviving RGC leaders are trapped like drowning rats in a sewage pipe, Iran's creaking oil industry is starting to shut in production thanks to the US blockade. Pumping will soon collapse, gasoline shortages in Iran next. I mean, first of all, this is Treasury Secretary saying drowning rats in a sewage pipe. The language that's being used is crazy from an official. Imagine saying that about other groups of people. It won't be tolerated. But the problem is there's a difference between hurting Iran versus hurting Iran enough to bring Iran to the negotiating table and make the concessions that you want, which you were not able to achieve in the battlefield. And Iran, and the problem with the data being presented of the 28th of April, which is the last day that Iran has to concede by because of the pressure, is that Iran is bypassing the blockade. And so we haven't stopped that 1.5 million of exports are not reduced to zero. The FT confirmed through tracking data that a number of ships that have oil are bypassing the blockade, and up to 1 million of barrels a day are bypassing the blockade. So instead of using that 1.5 million figure of oil exports being reduced to zero, it's actually being reduced to 1 million. And at the same time, Iran's being creative and innovative and finding other ways to store the oil, such as bringing oil tankers back into use and using them to store oil in there. So this can easily add another 30 days, possibly even another 60 days. And not to mention that China, a lot of this all goes to China, they can start escorting their Chinese vessels. And it's very unlikely that the US is going to start a war with China, attack Chinese vessels. I doubt that the US is going to escalate that into a bigger situation than it is. Not to mention that Iran has faced production issues before, because during COVID, they weren't able to export, and yet it didn't cause the government to fail. Of course, there were a lot of pressure on it, but it didn't force them to just kind of dissolve and people to rise up and have a civil war situation, which is what Trump also expects to happen. This is Iran's net flows by product, and the blue is the crude oil. You can see here from 2018 all the way to January 2026, and during 2020, that dropped all the way to around 200,000. And look how they've recovered. Not to the previous 2018 time, but they've really recovered a lot since then, reaching about 2 million net flows of oil. And they stayed months during 2020 with this very low net flows of oil. The reason why this is all very dangerous and it's not going to go to plan is that while we're waiting for this to happen, this pressure to happen on Iran, maybe an extra 30 days from now, maybe an extra 60 days from now, we're losing about 11 million barrels a day of oil because of the restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz and the war that happened. This is about 14% of oil exported globally we're losing. And the situation of higher prices, I mean, oil Brent is right now $115. I mean, if you try to buy it, it's much higher than $115. This is only going to get worse every single day. We don't do anything about this. Trump just waits, thinking that there's going to be enough pressure on Iran any day now. And while we're waiting any day now, oil is going to continue to go up. There's going to be more shortages. Inflation is going to keep on going up. And Trump is going to be more hesitant about what to do because he's saying, oh, just another more day. That's why he keeps on extending the ceasefire. It's like any day now, Iran's going to come to the table. And then he makes these kind of wild statements, such as this one. This is what Trump posted on his Truth Social. Iran has just informed us that they are in a state of collapse. They want us to open the Hormuz Strait as soon as possible as they try to figure out their leadership situation, which I believe they will be able to do. Thank you for your attention to this matter. This was 28th of April yesterday. This was 30 seconds before the markets opened, clearly trying to manipulate the markets because Iran, I mean, imagine Iran calling the US saying, hey, we're in trouble while they're in a war with the US. When has that ever happened where the country that you're at war with calls you and says, we're in trouble, we're about to fail any moment now? I mean, the fact that he thinks this is believable is hilarious. And he's clearly delusional. Iran's not going to capitulate. Iran's not going to surrender. It's going to have to find ways to deal with the situation, and it will. And even if some of the wells are going to be permanently damaged, they're not going to concede to the US. This is the biggest mistake that Trump is doing. He's thinking more pressure is going to make the Iranians fold. And he keeps on going deeper and deeper into this mindset of more pressure, because that's one of his philosophies is attack, 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 put pressure, 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 and you'll get the deal while the other side is on their knees. But that hasn't worked. You started a war, you destroyed a lot of things, and yet the Iranians are now not in fact making more concessions before, they're making less concessions than before the war. Before the war, they actually accepted zero enrichment, as was confirmed by the Omanis that were mediating the talks between the US and Iran, and it was also confirmed by British diplomats that were shocked by the concessions that the Iranians were making before the war started on the 28th of Feb. Now, the Iranians are saying the nuclear discussion is out of these discussions that we're having. Let's first discuss the US blockade and the Strait of Hormuz. And then once we agree on the end of the war, the permanent end of the war, we can discuss the nuclear element to this. That's less concessions than before the war, because now Iran has more leverage. It has the Strait of Hormuz, which it controls, and with it the supply of oil. Another major event that happened yesterday was the UAE leaving OPEC. This is the real reason why the UAE left OPEC. It's not to do with wanting to produce more oil and not being able to do so because of the quotas, the restrictions that OPEC puts on it. Because the quota of the UAE is about 3.5 million barrels per day. But in March, it only produced about 1.8 million barrels per day. That drop in production has nothing to do with OPEC. It's to do with the restrictions of the Strait of Hormuz and also the war that the US and Israel started on Iran. So leaving OPEC is not going to result in the UAE, producing more oil at the moment. It might next year, but it doesn't have any impact on current oil prices and current oil supply, because it's already not meeting that quota of 3.5 million. The real reason is that the US set that as a condition for providing these swap lines to the UAE. There's been news that the UAE is asking the US for money because it doesn't have money because of this war. That's not really true. The UAE has money. The problem is it has limited dollars in the country. Now, the UAE has a lot of dollars expenses, whether that's debt or other things that it has to pay in dollars. And you used to receive a lot of dollars from the oil that exports because it sells it in dollars. Now, they don't have the oil as much as before to export because of those restrictions, but it still has those expenses that it needs to pay in dollars. So what it's done is it's gone to the US and asked them for swap lines, i.e. the US would provide dollars to the UAE and it will kind of be paid back later. Another reason why the UAE needs dollars is because most people don't know that the currency, the dirham in UAE, is pegged to the dollar. That means it's not floating. The currency of the UAE doesn't go up and down. It just follows what the dollar is. The conversion is the same for years and years and years. Now, if there's less people going to Dubai or the UAE and buying dirhams, and instead more people are leaving the UAE and selling their dirhams, then to sustain that conversion, that fixed conversion, because now there's an increase in supply of the UAE currency, the UAE currency would go down. And to defend that, what the UAE would do is sell dollar and buy dirhams to kind of make sure that the conversion is fixed. And so to do that, it needs more dollar. It needs to get more dollar from the US so that it sells that dollar and buys dirham and fixes that conversion until the situation gets better. Now, the US, as part of that, it seems, this is not confirmed, wants the UAE, which is a big supplier of oil, to exit OPEC, because OPEC, it's a kind of a cartel that fixes the price and limits supply, and the US wants the supply to increase to lower the price of oil, which would be great for consumers and for the midterm elections. And they want any kind of messaging to come out to say that there's going to be an increase in supply of oil and therefore to calm the markets. But that supply isn't going to touch 2026. That's all going to come in 2027 because of the Strait of Hormuz situation. Now, I would love to know your thoughts about the situation with Trump's blockade, whether he's going to continue, whether you think it's going to be successful or not. If you did like this video, do hit the like and subscribe, and thank you very much.